Pastry for butter tarts. The first ingredient is 2¼ cups of flour. I use a canister like this to store my flour, and it doesn't have a very big top, so I'm gonna reach into it with a 1/4 cup measuring cup. And I'm gonna show you how to level off so that we can practice our measuring skills. So when you're measuring dried ingredients, you want to overfill your measuring cup so it's heaping, and then you want to take the flat edge of a knife, like the back side, and level it off. I would normally do this over the flour container, but it wasn't working for my camera angle. The next ingredient we're going to use is salt, which I also have in a canister. It requires you to use a pinch of salt. So a pinch is exactly what it sounds like. You take your thumb and your forefinger and you pinch it together. You can do a healthy size pinch, which is going to get a ton, or you can do a small pinch. I would say that you're looking for something in between. So you're going to take a pinch of salt, sprinkle it into your dish, and then you're going to do the same with sugar. The next ingredient is butter. You can use unsalted butter or salted butter. There's an asterisk beside the ingredient, and the author of the recipe has said I use salted butter, but if you use unsalted, you can add more salt. So I am going to use the salted butter, and the way that I am going to measure it or cut it is based on these measurements on the side of the package. So this square here to this line is 1 cup. This square is a 1/2 cup. And these two are a 1/4 cup. So if I want 3/4 cup, I'm going to use 1/2 cup plus a 1/4. So I am going to use between these 2 cup marks. It's important that your butter is cold, so you want to take it right out of the fridge right before you want to use it. I've cubed my butter and it's still cold, and I've measured out 5 tablespoons of cold water. I'm going to keep my tablespoon close at hand so that I can use that to sprinkle the water into the dough mixture. So let's get started. Step 1 in the butter tart pastry recipe is to put 2¼ cups of flour mixed in with my pinch of salt and pinch of sugar into a large bowl, sifting it. So I don't have a sifter at home. You could use a metal strainer and put that through a metal strainer into your bowl. I'm just going to use a fork. It'll have the same effect. It'll get rid of any of the density, and we'll mix it together and get rid of any clumps. Now I'm going to add the butter. This is the 3/4 cups of butter, and it says you can use a pastry blender or your clean fingers to cut in. Cut into is a technique. What I like to use is 2 knives. If you take 2 knives, you can move them across like this, cutting up the butter into the flour mixture. The goal is to keep cutting until you have little pea-sized pieces like this covered in flour. So the whole thing should look like that. You can also use your fingers to break apart the butter if you find that easier in the mixture like this. So find what works best for you. If you have a pastry blender at home, you can try that. And I'll show you what mine looks like when it's done. So when you get to the point where your flour mixture with the butter looks like this, kind of like a lumpy flour, you're good. If you have some like bigger pieces, you can still use your fingers to break those up. And then we're gonna move on to the next step. We're gonna begin to add 1 tablespoon of water at a time to the mixture until the dough starts to come together. So we'll stir it, combine it, add a tablespoon, stir it, combine it, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's ready to work with. So I'm about to add my last tablespoon of water, drizzle that in. I'm gonna use my hands to bring it together. You can see it's starting to stick. I'm gonna work that together a little bit and I'll show you. I might have to even add a little more water, and that's okay. So just see how yours goes and how it's sticking together. All right, the dough has started to come together. Now I'm going to take it and put it on a lightly floured surface and knead it a little bit more into a round ball. And then we'll wrap it and plastic and put it in the fridge for 30 minutes. To make a lightly floured surface, I'm going to take this little bit of flour and I'm going to spread it around on my table. You can barely see it. That's intentional, like that's on purpose. If I put too much flour, it'll dry out my dough even more. So you just want enough that the dough isn't going to stick to your table. If it starts to stick, you can add a little bit more and spread it around with the palm of your hand. You want to make sure your counter is clean before you start. Okay, the dough has been placed on the floured surface, lightly floured surface, and now we're going to knead it a bit. To knead it, you're going to push down with the heel of your hand or the butt of your hand and push it away from you, and then you're going to fold it over and complete that process again. It says to knead lightly, so you don't want to do that for too long. And this is a little smoother than what we started with. It's a compact ball. This is what we're going to saran wrap and put in the fridge for half an hour.